So hello world, welcome to another tutorial where I will be teaching you how to use APIs with Godot. The API we are going to be using is called wildtimeapi.org. I will leave the link in the description. And also, before we get to the tutorial, if you like this kind of content and you would like to see more in the future, please do consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the like button. And also you can follow my GitHub and like a couple of repositories there. So now we can get to the tutorial. So what I have in the tutorial currently, or in the scene currently, is just a few buttons, an option button and a line edit, an option button, a line edit, and a few labels to know what exactly these edits are doing. And then I have a center container with the label inside where we're going to display the data. I have also renamed the nodes to time zone, location, and display. And for the button, I have labeled it and named it as fetch, which is the button we are going to be using to fetch the data. So when we press this button, we are going to get the time zone that the user has picked, and we're also going to use the location, and then we will display that data in this label. So now we can get to typing stuff. So I have an empty script and I will just clear it. I had accidentally put it in. I will just attach a new script to the project. And what I will do first is to reference all the nodes that I require. So at onReady var time zone picker, for example, picker is equal to the time zone node. And then I'll just do this for all the other nodes that we require. So I'll just fast forward this so you don't have to watch me typing. It's a very tedious task. So now we have done referencing every node that we are going to be using in the scene. What we can do now is to call in the ready function. And what I want to do in the ready function is that I'll have another function here, and let's call it set time. So what we will do here is we will get our node. I forgot to mention that we have a HTTP request node in the scene also. So what we want when the scene has loaded rather, is to get the HTTP request node, and we will connect its request completed method to our self.setTime function, which is this one over here, of course. So that once we are finished getting the data in the API, we will call this function. So it's going to run request completed, and when it gets the signal, it's going to run the self.time function that we've created here. And this function will take in a few arguments, and those arguments are the result, response code, headers, and the body. So we will just put in those arguments here. If you like, you can also just use the signal, but I'll just use it like this instead. So the result, the response code, and the headers, and after that we will also get the body of the API. And the body is where all the data is going to be, and it's whatever has been shown in this is the data, and that will be the body. So let us move on and actually start getting data. So I will come here and take my fetch button, then I will put in a signal called pressed, so that when the button is pressed, we will get our URL, and then we'll put in our arguments, then we'll send a request so that we can be able to get back the data. So what I'll do first is to go to my API. For any API you will use, they have a detailed documentation of how you're supposed to use the API and which URL you're supposed to send the data to. So I'll just come here to the wildtimeapi.org, and I will put in the URL that they have given me at the very top of the page, and then I will create a variable and call it URL, and then I will put in the URL. After doing that, we want to be able to change the time zone and the location. So what I'll do is delete this too, and then I will put in the time zone picker. I had relabeled the option button as time zone picker and this one as the location picker. So I will put in the time zone picker.text, and then I'll add in another slash, and then I will put in the location picker's text. So now we can be able to change this. So whatever we change here, and then we press, and then when we press fetch, it will use the values that we have over here, and then it will use it to fetch the data. And then I also realized that I made a slight typo here. I'll change this to time zone, and we are done. So when we press the button, it will create our URL. Next, what we want to do is to take the HTTP request node, and then we will get a request from the URL that we have gotten. So once it sent the request to the URL, it will give us back some data, and then when we have gotten that data, we are going to go to this function, because we have connected this request completed function to the self.setTime function that we have here. So we will press the button, create our URL, and give it the variables that we have, and then we will run this function set time. And in this function, what we will do is we'll create a variable, let's call it data, and the data will be the body.get body. Let's do something here first, and this one will be a packed byte array. I think it was a packed byte array. Let me check. Yeah, it's a packed byte array. So we will do the body.get string from UTF-8, so that we can get a string from the data that has come. And then once we do that, we will convert this data into JSON, and JSON is the format that has been used here, which is basically like what you'd call a dictionary in Godot. So I will convert this into JSON by using the JSON object dot parse string. So we are going to get the body and convert it into a string. Then we are going to pass the string into a JSON object. So we can just change this to JSON. So our JSON is a string passed from the body. Next, we will take in our display, and then the display's text will be equal to the JSON's, and then we will use this property date time in our API. In whichever API you're going to be using, there's going to be a schema, and then it's going to show you what kind of data is found in the response that the API gives. So for example, in our API, we have this property called date time, and it gives us this data. So once we get the JSON, I can just print it for now, so we can see whatever the response will be. Or let's do something first, which I had forgotten to do previously. So in the time zone, it's an option button. We didn't really put any data in it. So in the time zone, we're going to put in some data. And the data will be, for example, Africa. Africa is a time zone. And then we'll put in another time zone like America. And then another one like Europe. And then these are the time zones that we're going to be using. So once I open the script, let's go back to the script, and then I will print the data that we will get. So I'll print the JSON file, and then I'll run my scene. So in the time zone, I can just set it as Africa. Then I'll just press a location like Nairobi, for example, Nairobi. And then when we press fetch, it's going to print the data And this data is the same data that we've gotten here, and it has the same schema. The schema is just basically the key value pair, so the day of the week and the type of value it is. So in order for us to access this data one by one, what we will just do is we'll just use it like a dictionary. So we are going to, for example, print json date time, and then once we run this again, and then we set our times on Africa and then Nairobi, then we call fetch, you can see that we get the data that we had in the API. So what we can do now is, instead of just printing the data, we can use the label or the display and then change its text to the JSON date time object. And then we can rerun this. And now when we change the time zone to Africa and the location to Nairobi, we can display the data. We can also change this maybe to America, or maybe let's say Europe, and then we'll turn this to London. We fetch the data and we can see that the time has changed. We can change this maybe to Africa again, to a place like Kampala, and we can see that the time is changing. So now you have a working API project with Godot. If you like the tutorial, please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and also please consider following my GitHub and starting some projects there. And yeah, I don't think I have anything more. If you have any questions or suggestions for content that you would like me to do in the future, please feel free to leave them down in the comments. And also, yeah, I think that's the end of this tutorial. So thank you for watching to the end, and goodbye.